Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session here. My name is Sean Casemore with NGen, and just getting the doors opened up, if you will, as the flood of you all join us in the room here. So apologies if that took a few minutes. We just kind of wanted to make sure everything was good to go. So it is still about a minute or so before top of the hour. We're going to give it till a couple minutes after before we start, just allow everybody to get in. So bear with us here for a moment. I'll keep my camera on so you know I'm here, and we'll get things going here in a second. So just stay tuned. Just again, it's Sean Casemore here. Thanks for joining us here today. For those of you just popping in, we've got quite a list of folks joining. So we're going to get started in about 2 minutes after the hour. Just want to give everybody a chance to hop in here. So welcome. Looking forward to today's session. Just give us a moment here as we let everybody in, and we'll get started. And again, for those of you just joining us, we're just going to get started in a moment. We're letting everybody pile into the room, if you will, and we should be good to go here in just a moment. So stay put and hold on. Just a couple quick logistical things here as we're waiting for the slides to come up and for our presenters to get started. I'm sure everybody here is probably an expert at Zoom by this point, but just so you're aware, oh, there's the slides, Chloe's slides. Thanks, Chloe. I can see those. That's perfect. Couple quick things then. If you just make sure that if you're not the presenter, that you're muted. Zoom has changed it so that we can't necessarily easily Zoom everybody, but it sounds like right now we're good. Also, what I'll be doing throughout today's presentation is I'll be monitoring the chat box and the Q&A. So if you do have any sort of questions at all, feel free at any time to post them there. The Q&A box is great because it allows me to check them off as we answer them, but neither here nor there. Either chat or Q&A is a great place to put any questions you have today. And yeah, it looks like we are now about 2 minutes after. I think we have most of our participants in. There's probably going to be a few more join us. So with that said, let's get started. It's Sean Casemore here with NGen. So first of all, just to make sure everybody's can hear me okay, in the chat box, if you can hear me, give me some sort of yes or hello or thumbs up or something, just to make sure you can hear me okay. Very good audio. Great. Wayne, good to see you again. Stephanie, Amir, great. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. And now everybody knows where the chat box is. That said, again, I want to thank you to today's presentation, Creating Value for Your Business with AI. Now, I'm going to suggest you a couple things. Realize that ultimately AI is an advanced technology. And what we're really interested to hear today, obviously, is how are manufacturers using AI to move their business forward? We've got a great presentation lined up. And so with that said, Chloe, if you can go to that second slide for me, those are looking great. Just a couple quick things, as I mentioned, housekeeping, and then we'll turn it over here. So today's session, as you know, if you've joined us before, what we do the week after these presentations, because sometimes Q&A isn't enough time to think through what you've heard and ask questions. So next Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to have a roundtable discussion on using AI to drive manufacturing success. Okay, so following today's presentation, probably tomorrow, because it takes a while for it to run, I'm going to send out the recorded link of this presentation. This is being recorded, okay? I'm going to send this to you so you'll have that recording. I'll also say, hey, if you'd like to join us in the roundtable next Thursday, just hit reply. And then what'll happen is probably Monday, I'll be sending you a link, no later than Tuesday, just so you don't get nervous, but I'll be sending you a link so that next Thursday you can join us. Okay, so that's kind of the format here. So if you'd like to further the discussion, please join us next Thursday. I'll be sending you a note on that by email by tomorrow at the latest, and you can just reply to me and I will get you the link to join us before next Thursday comes. Okay, so that is what I wanted to cover here about next Thursday. And with that, I'm going to jump into today's presentation just by giving you a little bit of a, I guess, a biography, if you will, of our presenters here today. So first of all, we have Selwa. Selwa is the founder of Kepler Intelligence and Sino at Root Intelligence. She holds a PhD in applied mathematics, and her area of expertise is data-driven solutions and management of innovation. Chloe is also joining us. And again, I'll let you each do a quick, more in-depth detail of yourself if you'd like as well. But Chloe's an electrical engineer with Creabox. She's 10 years of experience in implementing and managing innovation projects. She holds an MBA from HEC Paris and is currently the CEO, obviously, at Creabox, as I mentioned. She also leads the joint venture Root Intelligence, which supports businesses in their strategic integration of AI. The last thing I'm going to mention before we turn it over to Chloe here, as we've said before, there is still time left if you want to get your people upskilled, which sometimes can be necessary in order to take advantage of technology such as AI. Make sure you check out NGEN's Amp Up program. You can find it on our website, okay? And I'll mention more about that later. So with that said, Chloe, I'd like to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Sean, for this. Thank you for the introduction. We're very happy to be here to discuss this important topic. We think that is creating value for your business with AI. So we'll dive right in right now. So the presentation is basically three parts. So we have the business advantages of AI for manufacturers. Then we'll dig in a bit more precisely on how to implement an AI project. And at the end, we'll give you some real life use cases with our guest speakers that are here from JitBase and Lista. So that should be pretty interesting to give you a real hands-on example. But first, let's start with a quick poll to get a bit of an idea of where you're at in terms of AI integration. So Sean, I don't know if you can launch this poll.
Yeah, just give me 2 seconds here.
Great, thank you. This will give us an idea of who has maybe implemented some AI projects in the past, who is planning on doing so. We know this is something that we hear quite a lot these days, and we want to know a bit where the crowd is at today.
Hey, Chloe, it looks like we're having a technical difficulty with the poll. So if you maybe want to ask the question, what we'll ask everybody to do is just use that chat box to give their responses, and I'll read those responses to you, okay?
Okay, that sounds good. Whenever you have some responses afterwards, just let me know. It's just to get an idea of where people stand today, but that's not an issue. It won't change much for the presentation. So let's dig in with the first part. So business advantages of AI for manufacturers. So how do we create value? Where does the competition stand? So where do we stand today, Canada? So as you can see from this slide, we're down the line in red. So that's the manufacturing productivity growth from 2002 to 2017. So it shows us that we're a bit far behind. So, but the good news here is that AI is one of the ways, not the only way, of course, but it's one of the ways that we can increase our ranking if we want, because we predict, well, not myself, of course, but PwC predicts that AI can increase the GDP of countries by 14%. From here to 2030. So this is really exciting. This is a new, of course, use of technology of AI that can be really promising and help us be more productive over the upcoming years. If we look quickly here of the value from AI, so you might think, well, manufacturing is not necessarily, the business function or the activity where there's actually more gains to do from AI. Maybe it's more in marketing and sales and other projects that we hear quite a lot. But in fact, manufacturing is the business activity where there's the greatest gains that we can make from AI integration. So this is something also to keep in mind. If we look at where the competition stands today worldwide, because we now compete on an international level, of course, Europe is the leader. This is probably not a news for you, with Germany leading the pack with 69% of German manufacturers that have implemented at least one AI use case into their operations today. But there's Japan, But maybe more interestingly, there's the United States. So if you think probably where are your main customers, where's your main market, where's your main competition, chances are it's in the US. So if 28% of companies, manufacturing companies, have implemented at least one AI use case, it's probably time for us to jump in, since Canada is lower, is in less than 10% of manufacturers that have integrated at least one AI use case. So there's room for improvement, but we have great technical expertise in AI in Canada, so we have the power to do it. But what is AI? Right? This can be a big question. We're not going to dive into all the technical details of this. Of course, it's not the goal of the presentation today, but it's important just to note that it's nothing new. So it started in 1950s. It's been here for a while, but it stayed at the stage of an idea, a nice idea, for a while because we didn't have the computer power to implement it. And now, with all the advancement in technology, well, we have a lot more power and we have a lot more data also that we can exploit. So that's why it's the right timing right now to jump into this. So it's essentially a mathematical model combined with data and the right computer power. And artificial intelligence is the big family, of course, that includes all these different algorithms, technologies that we often use, but more precisely, machine learning, which is a term that we use and we hear quite a lot, is a subset of artificial intelligence. And what's interesting about this is that machines can learn from themselves, so from the data, instead of being always told what to do. So this is one of the innovations. And deep learning that you've probably heard of as well is a subset of machine learning. So it is just, it's often applied to projects that are a lot more complex and that have data that is more complex as well. But what's important to note on this side is just that it's not necessarily a question that you need to ask yourself, because sometimes it could be a bit confusing saying, what do I have to use? Should I use machine learning? Should I use deep learning? What's important is that this is something that will kind of define itself on its own based on the data that you have available, the type of project that you want to do. But what's important is to start with your business need, and this will come after down the line. So how does AI create value for your business? Well, as you can see from here, it can create value pretty much everywhere in all business activities. And that's what's interesting about AI. I know we hear a lot of projects maybe that are made around production, but it can go from supplier relations, all the way to the sales, customer relationships. Really, like all the processes can be optimized, can be improved in a certain way. But what's important is to see what should you start with for your own business? What's more important for you? So if we dig into the most common AI applications for the manufacturers, these could be really interesting use cases to look at. So you have computer vision-based quality control. This might be something you've heard of before. So what's interesting with this is that you can do an automated quality control with the computer vision that can analyze the different parts and detect the defective parts a lot more easier than a human can do. And that will improve the end production quality and reduce the cost and increase the accuracy of the inspection. So this is something where we see a lot of improvement right now with AI specific projects. So really interesting. Also, another use case that we have is for demand forecasting. So using machine learning, again, to be able to anticipate what is the demand, what your clients are going to require, what are they going to need. And this is also interesting because it uses historical data, client demands, what you've seen in the past, to be able to predict what will be the future demand. And this way you can adjust the rest of your processes accordingly. And then you can adjust supply, the production that can reduce the cost of overstocking and waste as well. So 2 examples. And the third one, to give you the third most frequent use case, would be using AI for intelligent maintenance. So you probably heard of predictive maintenance before. So this is something that is quite used right now because there's a lot of benefits that could be done from this application. So it allows to predict how your machines will work and when they will fail. And this way you can plan the downtime. So this way you don't have to necessarily just wait for the machine to break, wait for a part to break that's going to stop the line from working. You can actually predict it by analyzing the different sensors on the machines, seeing how it operates, when it usually fails. And this way it can reduce a lot your maintenance cost and it avoids the loss of production. So that's why it's an area that's really a focus right now in AI, specifically for manufacturers for production lines. So as you can see just from the little graph on the right side, so if you take maintenance, quality, and production, they account for almost 2/3 of the projects that are being done right now in the manufacturing sectors with AI. So that can give you an idea to see, does this apply to me? Could this be a good application for me or not? These are the ones that are mostly used in the industry right now. So now to dig a bit more into the details of how do you implement an AI project, more precisely, what are the key elements to consider? I'll pass it on to my partner, Selwa, which is the data scientist, AI expert that can explain all of this to you.
Thank you.
Selwa.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, I will go through the key element to consider before implementing any AI project and the common pitfalls and how to avoid them. So let's get started. So let's say you are convinced that AI is your next move. You might be asking yourself where to start or how concretely kick off your AI initiative. So first thing first, you need to take your time to think about the following question. Number one question, what is the business problem you want to solve? And if you have in mind multiple business problems where AI could bring value, you need to be very strategic on what project to prioritize. So I would suggest you to take the necessary time to do a process map so you can find your biggest area of inefficiency, your bottlenecks, and get clear about what the outcome you are expecting. Personally, I saw a lot of projects fail, not because of the algorithms nor the technical implementations, but rather because of bad scoping, not enough clarity on where an AI solution would have the optimal ROI for the organization. I can give you an example. Let's say you see your competitors are using AI to optimize their production, but you already do great at production. So maybe this is not like the best application for your organization. Maybe your priority is somewhere else, maybe at optimizing your packaging or managing your human resources. So in other words, my advice here is don't just follow the trend. You need to be strategic. You need to be careful on what project to start with. Number two, once you get clear on where your AI will be implemented, I think you will need to make sure to have the right people with the right expertise to lead the project. You need to find someone who is familiar with managing innovation, someone who will help you decide whether to develop the expertise in-house or to outsource, and also how the AI solution will be integrated within your existing systems, okay? Once you find this resource, you can go to my question number 3, which is like, you can start with this resource and start thinking together about your deadlines, what budget you can afford for this initiative, and if you have like that data already or you need to gather it. So all this information will help you decide on the approach to tackle the project, what to develop in-house, what to outsource, the tool that can help you accelerate the implementation. Maybe it's a third-party tool, maybe it's a service provider. So you just need to be clear about all this aspect before going to technical implementation. Another very important point is you need to find funding sources. And there is a couple of organizations that can help you finance your initiative. Once you have all the information, This will give you a big picture of your AI readiness. And it's very important to have this big picture and you know exactly your AI level of readiness. The good news is that whatever your level of readiness is today, you can always start at some point. You know, if you need data, just start now to gather it. If you already have data, just start to make sense of it. You can start with existing algorithms and AI tools that already exist. Just don't be afraid of it. My advice is to start small with a pilot project to make sure everything is working as you expected, and then you can expand your implementation at a larger scale. Next slide. So now I'm going to guide you through the typical common technical steps to any AI project. It doesn't matter if you decide to do it internally or to outsource, you need to know that your project will follow these typical steps. The step number one is gathering data. You will need to have data. So depending on your problem, you need to gather the right data that will help you develop your AI solution. Number two, cleaning and preparing the data. From my experience, this step is often underestimated. It actually takes a lot of time to prepare and clean the data. Typically, data scientists spend more than 80% of their time just cleaning and preparing the data. Then they start to model, then they start to train the model, and they deploy. It's kind of cycle. And whenever you gather new data, it is suggested to rerun the cycle to make sure that the outcome of the algorithm is accurate. So when the cycle is done, you can start implement and deploy your solution. And as I said before, I suggest to start small and then you can like expand your implementation to a larger scale. Now let's move to the common pitfalls. Unfortunately, more than 80% of AI projects fail today. And as we can see from the McKinsey survey on AI adoption, where more than 1,000 of companies were asked the question, some of the main issues are, number one, lack of a clear business case and data strategy. Number two is lack of appropriate human resources and lack of upper management engagement. There are some other reasons, but from my experience, the majority of the project I was exposed to that failed at some point, they have these three issues I just mentioned. So again, lack of clear business case and data strategy, lack of appropriate human resources, and lack of upper management engagement. What I can say is that all these pitfalls could be prevented by a better preparation, better planning and scoping, and also, if I would say, a shift in the company's culture. You know, today AI is here not to replace people. AI is a tool that supports your people. So just keep this in mind, think strategically, don't follow the trend, and yeah, I mean, the project will succeed, you know. So I will let Chloe give us some of the recommendations. So that's it for me. If you have any question, don't hesitate to ask your question in the chat box.
Yes, exactly. Please ask your questions. We'll try to answer them as best as we can at the end of the webinar. So just to continue on what Sal was saying, recommendations on these three main areas where we see that there's a lot of issues usually with AI projects that we're trying to prevent here. So start small and simple. but on a scalable solution. So this is something that's important. So it's great to start with a small project, but it's something that has to have an impact on the company, because your end goal is an ROI, right? And the first projects are the ones that should have the greatest ROI, because they're usually the low-hanging fruits that you can get from AI. So you start with a simple project that you target well, a business need. So what are the most important things that you need to solve? What are the main processes you want to improve in your company that are going to make a real difference? Start with a little project and then scale it to, for example, for one machine to a whole production line, or to one person to a whole team. But this is really the way to start it. Bring leadership on board. This is not always easy depending on where you stand on the company, but it's really important to have a vision around AI integration, because it's not just a project that's going to end after a few months. This is something that you're going to integrate into your process, that you'll have to maintain, that you have to keep updated. And it's kind of a shift, Selwa said, of the way you can do things in certain processes. Communicate on the intentions and the key benefits for the company and the staff. So it's important to clearly communicate on this point, because often we see when we get in a company that there's some employees worry about their own job, worry that they might not be able to train properly or get the necessary skills to be able to integrate these new technologies. So it's important to explain to everyone in the team that's going to be affected, what's the goal with this project? How are you going to improve the company, and how is this going to improve the day-to-day life of the staff as well? Because it's really a tool. It's something that's going to be that's there to be useful for the people as well. So it's, as I say, it's not something that's here to replace people. It's something that's there to help them make their life better. Again, get external help when needed. So this is also something Selwa touched on. So this is some of the issues. Do you want to do things in-house? Do you want to outsource? What can you do? It's important to consider that you can do a hybrid model. So there are things that you can do on your own. You can train a few employees to be more aware of the technology, how to use it, how to manage the project. This is something really important. And then you can use external help for specific things. For example, cleaning the data. You might get some help for scoping the projects, trying to know, but it could be a collaboration. So that's something that's really interesting on that point as well, is there's no one way of doing it. Do it in a way that's best for your business, best for the employees. Start collecting valuable data now. This is something that we cannot say enough, and it's valuable data. So it's not any data. So that's why it's important to start thinking today strategically of what you want to improve in your company, and start collecting data on that area, that specific business activity. It's not important to gather data on necessarily everything, or a whole amount of data that then will be maybe more difficult to clean, more difficult to filter through. What's really important is to collect valuable data on specific projects that you know will be useful for your company business-wide afterwards. And the final point, well, use financial resources that are available to you to de-risk the projects right now. So we're pretty lucky right now in Canada. There's a lot of different institutions, government help, the superclusters, of course, that are there to help you de-risk these projects. So innovation is always a part of risk. We can never totally anticipate what's going to happen. But there's this idea right now that we want to push companies forward, help them be more innovative. And this is just some resources that you can use right now that are available to you, that it's a good timing for this to just jump in and start a project with these resources in hand that can help you on training and financing. So now, if we go to the third part, so that's an interesting part as well, because it's more real life use cases of successful AI projects. So it's interesting to talk about AI, say what it is, how it can help in a more general way. We've seen the use cases, but it's never as good as giving a real life example. So if I can just give some examples just of some numbers that we see from large companies that are pretty popular, that have managed to successfully implement an AI projects. You have in different industries. So that's also a key message. It's not specifically addressed to one industry, or there's not one industry that should implement AI and others don't. So it could be in the food industry, it could be in the automobile industry, it could be in construction, it could be really in anything. And these are just a few examples from big companies like, you know, Danone that reduced their forecasting errors by 20% with ML. You also have, for example, in ships, so Caterpillar that saved 400K per ship per year with predictive maintenance. As we've seen before, this is one of the main areas of focus right now in manufacturing. So that's pretty, that could be pretty interesting as well. And Budweiser as well. So even in beer, right? So, and in any industry, really, you can make a lot of improvements. So they've managed to do a 10x ROE the first year. So this is when I was saying, go with quick projects with a higher ROI. So these are really the first projects that you should start with really improved ROI. Go with the low-hanging fruit first, and then start to expand and see other areas in your business that could benefit from AI. So more interestingly, so we have Frédéric here that is here to give a real life example. So they've successfully implemented a project in collaboration. So it's JetBase and Lista. So they're going to explain all of this to you. So I'll hand it on to Frédéric. I think that is right here to present their use case and explain how they've managed to do this.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Chloe, and hi, everyone. Pierre, are you also on the line?
Unmuting. Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna start, and hopefully Pierre gonna be able to speak as well. So if we go to the first slide, I'm gonna start with the problem statement. So it's a problem in the CNC machining environment, but also in other industries. So first, reducing cost, and also the shortage of specialized employees. So when I first met with Pierre back in 2018, he was working at Alta Precision, now he's with Lista. And he had machine monitoring in place. So he was collecting data from his machines. And he knew that his machines were only running about 30% of the time. And he knew also that it was not efficient to have a ratio of one operator per machine. What he didn't have at that time is a tool able to use the data that he was collecting from his machine monitoring system and to use it to help the operator to manage more machines at the same time. So hence, to optimize the interaction between humans and machines. So jointly, Chloe, you can go to the next slide. We developed a system called OPS, Optimal Path System, which is like a GPS that guides the operator on the shop floor and tells him exactly when he has to be back on every machine that is managing. So how do we do that? With the machine monitoring system, we get live machine data. So in real time, we collect a lot of information from those machines. And with AI, we're able to predict when the operator must be present on the machine for manual operation, and when the machine is able to run lights out for a certain period of time. So here you can see a representation of one operator running 4 machines at the same time. In green, the machine is up and running. We don't need the operator to be behind. And in orange and yellow, the operator must be present to do either manual operation, or it could be a short cycle time, so it doesn't have the time to do to go on another machine. On the next slide, we see, so AI is used in 2 aspects. First, we look at the historical data in order to be able to predict when the operator is needed. And also we added operational research algorithm in order to give the best scheduling to the operator to manage those 4 machines. So at the top, you can see when the operator is following human intuition, he looks at the machines and usually it goes to the first machine that stops. But in most cases, it's not the optimal path. So below you can see OPS calculating in real time the best way to run those 4 machines at the same time. And because we get live machine data, we can readjust in real time according to what is currently happening. So let's say that the operator is late on his manual operation, or maybe there is a problem on one machine, so the machine stops. We continuously recalculate the optimal path. And as you can see in this example, at the end of the day, you save like 20 to 25% of your time. On the next slide, you can see the operator's views. So this is actually what the operator sees on his tablet. So what we recommend is on every machine, you add a tablet. And in this example, the operator is running 3 machines at the same time. So whether it's on one machine or the other, you're gonna add the tablet and have the relevant information. So currently it's 8:40 p.m. He's on the first machine, so we can see in orange. And when we look at the left column, he knows that he still has 3 minutes to complete his operation. And then he's gonna follow the path, so he knows that in 3 minutes, he has to go on the second machine. And in 17 minutes, he's gonna go on the last third machines. And as I mentioned, everything refresh in real time. So if it's working on your side, Pierre, I'm gonna let you explain the real case at Lista.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, but you can't see me. That's okay. We'll go to the next slide. Just so everybody knows, I'm a really good looking guy. But since you can't see me, you can't debate that. So we're at Lista. We're a manufacturing company. We machine. We do a lot of turning, all aerospace part. And of course, what we started off when I first met Fred. I was on another company called Alta Precision, and we actually asked them to develop this application for us. We didn't really know where we were, but the first test case we had a guy sitting in front of a machine for about 50 hours doing nothing. Or it was a 60-hour cycle process, and 50 hours of that time we found out he was doing nothing. So then we said, well, it would be nice to know when he is available, or when he when there's a period of lights out, so we can actually send him to go do another task. And that's what OPS does. And just at least over here, even though it's much more lower cycle manufacturing process, we actually managed to get an average uptime of 64%. So basically, for every laborer or machinist on the floor, we're getting a 25% uptime in terms of productivity from that operator, because now he now knows and he sees, and even sees it coming when lights out periods are there, and where therefore where he has the time to go to another machine. And we actually, it's like a digital supervisor, send him off to the next task. So we can go to the next slides. Of course, that 25% improvement we think is going to get much bigger as we improve the lights out condition. And that's the other thing about the OPS. Now we know where the user intervention parts are in the program. So now we can start working on eliminating a tool setup or installing robotic solutions to prevent that intervention, and therefore driving lights out more and more on our machines, and therefore improving the productivity of each of the employees. So what's interesting is someone said earlier, you start small and you grow into it. Well, we started small, and we got really excited, and we're really growing into it. So the first thing is we picked up a lot of data from the machines. We weren't using the data. Now, as the data is flowing in through OPS, we're finding that it's a source of incredible amount of knowledge to help us identify lights out opportunities, so therefore reduce the labor implications. We can pinpoint problems. Before, we knew that when you were running a program, you had 3 hours to do it, you did it in 4.5, but where in the program we had an issue, we couldn't tell. With OPS, now we know that. And of course, we're now asking JIT-Base to add machine monitoring, so we don't want to just manage the work scope of the operator when he's machining, but all the other subaltern tasks, such as getting the work orders, getting the material, doing a setup, doing an inspection. So now we want to start involving him in the full spectrum of all the tasks he may have. And because we're collecting the data from the machines, now we can start thinking along those lines. We also want to use new algorithms to optimally guide the operator, like I was saying, to these other tasks. We really want to improve the operating efficiency with no wait time whatsoever, and increase the uptime. So basically, all these hours where you just have an operator in front of machines with his arms crossed, that's what we're trying to get rid of. What the future lies, and we've already started dabbing into that, is now that we're collecting all this data from the OPS, the next question is, can we do more with it? Well, of course, the first thing we're doing right now is we're downloading information from to a Lambda function, a company in California, through Fred's company, JIT-based, and we're looking at, can we predict tool wear? Because now we got not only the JIT base connected into the machine and collected all the standard parameters in order to drive the OPS, but are picking up far more data, such as spindle load, feed, speed, flow of coolant, and so on. And now that we have that data, the next question is, can we predict tool wear and establish a robotic solution that then swaps tools? Now you're making that more lights out, and therefore the OPS becomes more efficient, and you really start compounding benefits over benefits. If we were to do that, just to give you a size of benefit, we spent about $1.8 million in tools, cutting tools at Lista. So if we were to drive efficiency and predict tool wear, and we figure we are swapping tools at 50% of their life for security reasons in order not to scrap the part. So if we were to just capture 20% of that, well, that would represent a $400,000 a year saving for Lista. And of course, now that we're there, then the next issue is, the next step beyond that will be adaptive manufacturing. If we now know the load on the tool, can we speed and increase the feed, decrease the feed based on tool wear? Something that a human can never program. It's a real-time decision. And of course, artificial intelligence would allow us to get control and get a real-time solution in there by basically modifying the program, the feed and speed as we go along. So very exciting about, very positive results so far. JIT-based has delivered on all the expectations, and now we're growing the relationship with so far greater. But you know, the first speaker said it starts small, develop the expertise. We didn't have the expertise in-house. We turned to JIT-based. We created that partnership. We're driving what we need. They're driving the solutions to what we need. We're creating the test environment at our place. So where the beta versions are tested here, it goes back to JIT-based to do some improvement. Great relationship, great efficiencies in the process, and it's going to bring, at least in the next century, of one of the most modern companies in Quebec, we hope, in a very short time. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you so much for this, Pierre. This is a really great example of collaboration, and that's exactly what we were saying, finding hybrid models, doing things in-house, getting more expertise, and then getting also some help from experts to do specific things. So that's a real, really promising example, and I hope it will give a lot of ideas to other participants to continue on that note. So this ends it up for us right now. I don't know about the poll, Sean, if you've had any questions as well that we can address at this point, either for us, for also for JIT-based or Lista. We're all here to help to answer different questions on the presentation. I hope this was useful. I know it's a big overview of AI, of how we can apply it, different applications and all that. The goal is really to tell you, you can start, you can try, just keep the right mindset, ask the right questions at the beginning, not just go right away into a project running. It's important to know what are your real business needs from the beginning, and as Pierre mentioned as well, start small and then scale up. That's always the best way of doing it. So if there's any ways we can help answer some questions, Sean, we're here.
Great. So thank you very much. So Chloe Selwa Frederic and Pierre, appreciate all of your contributions. Our goal, for those of you who are here today, our goal was not just to talk about AI, but to bring some very practical applications to life. So, because we find that a lot of folks understand what AI is, but can't really bridge the gap between what is AI and how do I incorporate it in my business. So appreciate very much. I think it was a great presentation. So there are some questions. They're scattered here, so I'm going to just start to ask the questions. What I'll do is I'll ask the question, open it up to the presenters to answer, and we'll just go that route. So I'll start. I'm going to kind of work bottom up here. So one of the first questions Amir has asked, one of the latest questions, he says, if you don't mind, and if time permits, which it does, how do you explain ethical AI? Do you have a simple example that he can use to explain it?
So what do you want to take on this?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it's a huge subject, and it depends really on your application. If you will apply your AI solution, let's say for autonomous cars, I mean, there are still discussion around this, but if I can just give you a quick idea on how to get ethical with your AI, you really need to be transparent about your process or the way you are implementing your AI. You need to get clear on your outcome, and depending on your application, from my experience, we worked, for example, with the comments coming from people, and the first thing we needed to implement is using ethical AI code to make sure that we don't discriminate comments depending on the name or the name we find, because the comments we received came from organization. So we needed to make sure that everything is anonymized, everything is confidential. We need to make sure that our solution will not will not have any impact or discriminate some people from others. So it's a big discussion you need to get with your provider and internally to get clear on what are the borders we don't have to cross. There is no, there are some common like ethical code, but in practical, it will depend on your application. But for sure, a lot of transparency need to be involved, a lot of discussions, and you need to exclude biases as much as possible.
Thank you very much, Selva. So another question that Amir asked just a little bit before that last one, and I'll just read it out here. When you say AI tends to support as opposed to replace, and I think he was talking about employees, how can we really prove this point? If I've been given some perspectives, but from your point of view, so you've shared, I think, with Amir some perspectives, but from your point of view, how can he justify this claim?
I think the application of JIT-based with Lista is a great example. Here we can see that AI is used to support the HR management more than replacing people. Like the majority of AI application, they're not here to replace people. Everyone, when we talk about AI, everyone is talking about robotic, about anonymous cars, but the reality is that more than 80% of AI applications are here as decision-making support rather than replacing people. If I take, for example, predictive maintenance, we will always need someone to fix our machines, but here we will just be able to prepare our operation instead of just react last minute. So from that perspective, AI is here more for supporting people than replacing people.
Yeah, and if I could just add on this, there's also the whole question about labor shortage right now. So that's also one of the reasons why it's not replacing people. Most of manufacturing companies, and you're in a better position than me to talk about this, obviously. But there's a people shortage, so employee shortage in different functions. So AI is a way to make sure that you can maybe help support or make the work of different employees more efficient. So this way you don't necessarily have that much of a shortage, and you can make more with maybe less employees in that specific area. So, but it doesn't mean that you have to replace employees. This is not something that we've seen. And when we look at the different numbers and statistics on that, because there's a whole lot of different statistics. If ever you have any questions, don't hesitate to send me an email. I can send you more information on that. But there are numbers now that are coming out that show that companies that have implemented AI into their operations have not let down any employees, have not fired people, have not reduced their staff. So this is something that's documented as well right now.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, and I would add to that, Chloe, I think from a non-technical standpoint, as you suggested, one of the greatest challenges a lot of manufacturers face is hiring and retaining people to do sometimes what are very repetitive jobs, sometimes very monotonous jobs. AI in some cases may offer an opportunity to provide some automation to perform that job that you can't hire or retain people to do anyway. So there's definitely benefits there. We have a question here from Wayne Ludman. Wayne asks, can you please provide a specific example of how financial resources have been used to de-risk an AI project?
I can answer that if you want. There are many government subsidies programs to put you in place, as well as we are looking at, so we leverage those subsidies and those programs because there's a lot of money available. We can end up supporting about anywhere between 50 to 75% of the cost of projects through these projects. But of course, if you add the return on investment of these projects, you start small, you start, it's a wheel that keeps generating revenue. And in fact, you end up in a positive cash flow situation fairly quickly if you do it right. So not doing AI is not a good idea, and not doing it because you think it's going to cost you money is even a crazier idea. Just remember, adding a little bit another point to the previous question is, yeah, there's a labor shortage out there, and certainly AI is not going to replace it. But AI does suffer from one issue, and that is the same issue as anything you ever do that's called change in a company. So AI is just a tool. It's a tool like robotics. It's a tool like a programmer. But it does require different skill sets, which you don't find in the typical organizational structure that you had in the past. So that is the change that you need to manage. But once you've introduced that new skill set in your organization through a partnership like we did, or we actually hired some mechatronics engineers, for example, internally to help us create a better dialogue between machine and software. Next thing you know is those are the hard blocks that you need to go around. But it's the same thing as any time you do change in an organization. There's resistance to it. What I like, and this is going to sound really bad, but there's nothing like a crisis to push change, and therefore introducing AI. The COVID crisis is a perfect case in point. We downsized, but we kept a lot more people on staff in order to pursue and be positioned for an AI solution with our OPS software. And and our employees see that, and we say that's because we believe in this, we believe in that. But we also went forward and says we're gonna double our sales. We're gonna keep the same head count the same. So the question is well, why is that? But because can't find the talent, and therefore we need to do it with us. So we're going to create wealth. We're going to share, but we need to do this, and that's why people are jumping on the wagon. But you got to manage it as a change issue, because that's what it is.
Great, thanks, Pierre. Another question that was actually sent to me here, Pierre, and I think it's for you. And you addressed some of this in your presentation, so I apologize if this is a little bit repetitive here, but what was the trigger, the initial trigger that really identified that you needed to start an AI project?
This is a great story, because when I first met, well, what happened is we were doing a part on a landing gear part, And every time I walked by this $2.4 million machine, I saw a machinist with his two hands crossed and about nodding and about ready to fall asleep. And every time I asked the question, well, why is he there? And they said, well, he needs to participate when he's required. I said, well, when is he required? And we don't know that. So I sat next to the machine. It took 60 hours of continuous machining. I found out that 50% of the time, or 50 hours of those 60 hours, he wasn't required. So the next question is, how do we drive we don't want to write a whole bunch of programs, but how do we write some software to analyze our programs to tell us when the operator is really needed and when he is not? And when we did that, that's how we got into the AI strategy. And to be honest with you, once we got there, Fred and his team brought a whole layer of extra knowledge that we didn't have. Technology and AI there's a generation gap. Guys like me at 60 years old, we own the business, we own the companies. The real knowledge of these new technologies resides in the youth. So tapping into Fred, what happened is that he came back and said, well, what if we manage the path of the employee by looking at 2 or 3 machines at the same time? And he started developing these algorithms and, of course, generating the results. So we kind of fell into it. But the initial problem was I got 60 hours, and 50 hours of that 60 hours, the guy sitting in the front of the machine doing nothing. How do we stop that?
Great, thanks so much, Pierre. And there's one more question for you that came in, and again, I think you covered this, but it's a good ending point for our conversation here this morning. If you had to summarize, the top 3 challenges that you really experienced during your AI project to date, what would those be, Pierre?
Well, they're not my challenges, but I'm going to tell you, because I did I turn companies around. That's what I've done for many years. And I asked myself, how do you turn the next companies around? And then I did some reflection about this. So not necessarily my issues, but I think the industry's issues. First of all, I touched on it. There's a generation gap between knowledge and technology and operations. So the old guys who own the company, who own the relationship with the customers, they did it this way. That's how my dad did it. And so there's a resistance there because the knowledge doesn't belong in the right hands right now. So you need to tap into the youth, into the schools and the university, and you need to make faith that you find a Frederic Scherer out there that's willing to work with you. And that's what we did. The second thing is the skill set, the organizational structure that you need today with AI, and whether it's AI, additive manufacturing, robotics, and all that, you're seeing some new skill sets that are required that we don't have in an organizational structure. So you need to be able to make that step and understand that you need this new type of talent. Now you can hire it, and of course there's a lot of great subsidies program to hire. You can hire a new mechatronics engineer right out of school at a master's degree with 50% subvention to make it happen. The third thing, of course, is the management of change. You're challenging way people think and way people do. You're putting everything back on the table and you're saying, we can't do it like that. But you got to keep it in very simple words. You got to simply say, I want to do this with no human intervention. How do I do that? And when they say, well, am I going to lose my job? And I said, no. We can't hire anybody. There is no one to hire. So how do we do this? And then you drive home the concept that it's about AI and these new technologies. It's about generating wealth. Well, if you're a really good business owner, what you do is you generate wealth and you share it with your employees. So the employees, once they live, success breeds success. You just got to live one little success, and then you'll see it'll take off. But it's a change management strategy, and that's the kind of the third hurdle.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that, Pierre. Really appreciate it. And once again, I want to thank Chloe, Selwa, Frederic, and Pierre for joining us here today. And really, I would suggest putting some reality, if you will, bringing AI to life in manufacturing in Canada. So there's been some great comments. I'd suggest for all the panelists, feel free to check out the chat box. There's lots of great compliments there. If we can move one more slide then, Chloe, we'll just wrap up here. So I'll mention before I talk about the slide, if you'd like to keep this conversation going, make sure you join us next Thursday, 10 a.m. I'll be sending out an email with all of the recording of today and that information. So that'll be forthcoming by tomorrow. And then our next presentation is going to be Thursday, February 25th for the What's Next Thought Leadership series. Looks like it says Through Leadership, but it's Thought Leadership. And the topic is going to be additive manufacturing in Canada. We're going to be joined by Mark Kirby, who's going to be discussing various opportunities for additive manufacturing in Canada, as well as some important outcomes and observations from several recent roundtable discussions that NGen has facilitated. So hope you'll be able to join us for that. Again, I'd like to thank our panelists, Chloe, Selwa, Frederic, and Pierre for joining us here today. And I wish everybody here all the best. The last thing we're going to do is that poll that we missed at the beginning of the day is going to pop up in your browser. So if you stay online here, you'll see it. Very much appreciate if you could participate in that. Thanks again, everybody. Stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Great.